Our speaker today is Matt Pargeter-Villareal. Matt is a recent Master of Divinity graduate from Bright Divinity School with a concentration in sexual and gender justice. He and his husband Fernando live in Arlington, and Matt is currently serving as the co-facilitator of the young adult group at Westside UU Church in Fort Worth. Welcome back, Matt.
So of all of the sources of our living tradition in Unitarian Universalism, my favorite has become the direct experience of transcendent history and wonder affirmed in all cultures that leads to a renewal of the spirit. It also leads young ministers to stay up until 1 a.m. in the morning, rewriting and rearranging their sermons. So, needless to mention, I will not be reading Animals from Song of Myself by Walt Whitman today. But I do have another reading which comes from a book called Earthbound, which is a devotional by Brian Nelson. Does the caterpillar know what's about to happen when it spins a cocoon? Does it realize that it is doing more than simply seeking safety? Does it understand that it's involved in something greater than simply acting on instinct? Does it imagine, within its long-sought rest, the beauty to which it will open itself? Does it glimpse the possibility that it may continue its life in a dramatically different fashion than anything it has experienced up to this time? Does it have any idea that it's about to transform? Do you? And with that, I invite you into a spirit of meditation. And I bring you words of meditation for rest, called Rest in the Peace of This Moment by my friend and colleague, Chris Cervantes. And I invite you to assume a comfortable position, close your eyes, and center yourself. Rest now. Rest in the peace of this moment. Be at ease. Look up at the stars and down at the grass. Imagine the stars looking back at you over years and centuries across oceans of empty space. Imagine the feel of the grass on your bare feet and feel it, dry and crunchy, soft and supple. Rest now. Rest in the peace of this moment. Dream for a little while of young people and young animals, innocent in the way of the young, careless and uncaring, accepting everything in their newness. Dream for a little while of the elders and the wisdom they have to give, the voices that say to you, it is right and proper to rest now. Rest in the peace of this moment. Be still at the turning axis of the world and let go of the long unspooling of history, of sorrow and joy and birth and death and all the long years between. Rest now. Rest in the peace of this moment. Blessed be. So, why, after I spent the past week ministering to 42 high school campers, am I beginning a sermon talking about caterpillars spinning cocoons? In the short time that I have been involved in youth ministry, I feel like teenagers are perceived by adults who are looking at them from the outside in inherently negative connotations. The assumption is that when teenagers gather together in community, it is only for social motivations, and that there is no substance to their time together or their conversations. My response to this is that nothing could be further from the truth. To spend time with a group of teenagers is to bear witness to the potential that they possess. It is to see them spin cocoons of their own, in which they begin to shape themselves into the adults that they have the ability to become. When they finally emerge from their cocoons and become butterflies, they have not only realized something of themselves, but they offer us a glimpse of what they envision for the future, the society that they look to create, and the beauty that they look to bring to it. For the past 7 days, in addition to the ministerial work that I was brought in to do, I was given the unique opportunity to be a guest in an intentional community setting that was very much spun over the years by generations of UU high schoolers. My experience could probably be likened to that of Henry David Thoreau, who went into the woods at Walden Pond to find himself. I did find myself during my time at U-Bar-U, and I also found the truth behind Nelson's words, that humanity has a lot to learn from those that it is quick to pass judgment upon. For the reality is that there is much that we have to learn if we would only look a little closer. My close friend Andrea Hermerding had been trying for the better part of 3 years to get me to come down to U-Bar-U and to become part of the high school camp staff. Every time that she had asked, there had always been some sort of complicating factor: work, school, other prior commitments that had made it impossible for me to join. This year, in light of my recent graduation from seminary and a particularly pointed Facebook message from Andrea, whose basic gist was, "What the heck is it going to take?" I decided to take the plunge and agreed to spend a week at U-Bar-U. I had developed somewhat of an affinity to youth ministry in the short time that I had been serving local churches, and I'd never been a camp counselor before, so I was eager to embrace the challenge. It became very clear early on that what I had signed up for were going to be the likes of which I had never seen or experienced. My expectation was that, because of the fact that I was in ministerial formation, and that I had copious amounts of experience with preaching and planning worship, that I would get tapped early on to help with the worship services at camp, something which was very much in my wheelhouse. I was, however, told very quickly and very early on that this was not going to be the case. There were plenty of senior campers on staff, and they had already divided and delegated responsibilities among themselves. Not only had the 2 senior campers who were in charge of worship planned out all of the worship services for the week of camp, complete with corresponding hymn selections, but they had already been completed since October of the previous year. No, it was safe to say that they had clearly a handle on worship. The specific role that they needed me to fulfill for the week was that of camp chaplain. And what I was actually being tapped for was my experience as a pastoral care provider. There was just one slight problem. I didn't have any experience as a pastoral care provider. At least, not that I could clearly identify. If you had asked me to rate my ministerial skills on a scale from 1 to 10, with 1 being the least developed and 10 being my best quality, I would probably rate my abilities at pastoral care as either a 1 or a 2, if I put down a number at all. There are some seminarians and young ministers who are drawn to pastoral care and pastoral practice, but I've never felt like it was one that had a place in my toolbox of gifts and talents. As much as the prospect of being responsible for providing pastoral care scared the crap out of me, I realized I was being handed a golden opportunity in a safe space to be able to better hone my pastoral care skills. I also figured that it would be better to approach my time as a chaplain in a hospital setting for clinical pastoral education, having at least some experience providing pastoral care to a group of individuals. And for this reason, as much as I knew that I was going to be outside of my comfort zone, I relished the chance to have the opportunity to see myself as something I never had, a pastoral care provider. The next clear indication that my experience at UBarU was outside of my comfort zone was a purely geographical one. For those of you who have never been or have never heard of UBarU, it is a 140-plus acre ranch and retreat center located in Mountain Home, Texas, approximately an hour and a half northwest of San Antonio and roughly 20 to 30 minutes northwest of Kerrville. Other than a post office, a bar, and a few RV parks, aside from UBarU, there is really nothing in Mountain Home, Texas. It was originally a campground owned by a group of local area Quakers, but only partially developed the campground before selling it to Unitarian Universalists. It is now co-owned and administered by First UU Austin and First U San Antonio, and it is designated as a nonprofit. It is also one of the most gorgeous places in Texas I have ever seen. From Fort Worth, it's about a 4.5-hour drive, assuming you drive straight there and do not stop along the way. Most of the trip takes you through scenic roads and farm-to-market roads that are surrounded by working cattle ranches. It also takes you through a number of small hill country towns that are both a slice of America and completely and utterly devoid of all cell reception and GPS signal. I discovered this quite the hard way after I stopped to pump gas in Brady, Texas, after turning off my GPS. When I jumped back in my car to get back on the road, I was greeted by a message stating that my phone was unable to find an internet connection. Being used to having parents who live in an area of the hill country where cell reception is spotty at best, I figured I would simply keep driving in the direction of Fredericksburg, and eventually 3G would kick in, and I would be able to resume my route. After driving 80 miles with still no GPS, my optimism had turned into serious questions of whether I was lost and completely cut off from all civilization. This existential crisis continued until about 10 miles north of Fredericksburg, When my phone finally found a small and fleeting moment of LTE cell reception, and I was able to reorient myself. I was happy to report that I was still on time, but it was a physical reminder of the fact that there was no backing out of what I had signed on to do, and there was quite literally nowhere to run. As it turned out, the lack of connection to the outside world was a blessing in disguise. It forced me to disconnect from the reliance on technology that I hold as a late millennial, and to focus more on being present as a member of the community, and to form connections and working relationships with other adults and staff. It also allowed me small and mundane joys that I would have otherwise missed if my eyes were glued to my smartphone. One of the particular things I enjoyed each morning was the ability to sit in one of the rockers or large Adirondack chairs on the front porch with a cup of coffee and to sit and center myself as I watched the bevy of hummingbirds that would fight and jockey for position at one of the many feeders hanging along the front of the meeting house. We had work to do. There were the expected icebreaker games and staff advisor meetings addressing various logistical issues of the week ahead, but it was nice to be able to allow myself to slow down a little bit. Perhaps it was because I have become so accustomed to living my life at a breakneck pace that I didn't realize how much I needed the chance to be forced to slow down. The enjoyment was short-lived as soon as the campers arrived. 42 high school campers between the ages of 14 and 18. The 3 available bunkhouses that U had were soon filled to maximum capacity. Senior Camp, also known by its other name, Reeb Camp, named after the UU civil rights martyr Reverend James Reeb, is almost entirely and completely self-run by the teenagers who attend it. A handful of the campers had been pre-screened and pre-selected in the months leading up to camp by adult staff to be leaders of the various activity groups at camp. Aside from small amounts of consultation from the adults, everything that goes on at Reeb Camp, worship, right relations, writing up a covenant, community service, social events, and community activities are all planned out by the high schoolers themselves. As chaplain, I worked most closely with the Right Relations group to help in writing up the covenant that would be adopted for the week while everyone was at camp. Once drafted, approved, and signed by all the campers, every evening they had an all-camp meeting where the campers would come together and discuss how well the community had done at following the covenant, and if there were any issues or areas of growth that the community as a whole needed to work on in order to better live by the covenant that we had adopted. I have been a member of several small groups in a number of different UU congregations in the 8 years that I have been a member of the Unitarian Universalist faith. And I can confidently say I have never had a more pleasant and stress-free experience coming up with a covenant than I had with the high schoolers. It was amazing to see how truly wise beyond their years each of them were, and how much genuine care they displayed for one another. The question that kept organically coming up as the covenant was being devised was, what do you need in this covenant in order to feel safe? What do you need in order to make sure that everyone is included and that no one experiences being left out? I watched a process that normally takes a group of seasoned UU volunteer adults several meetings in order to hash out be done by 42 high schoolers in one 20-minute session. Once the covenant was written and adopted, it was not just something that the high schoolers followed, it was what they lived for the week that they were at camp. Sure, There were a few difficult conversations to be had with a few individuals, mostly regarding issues of situational awareness and radical respect, how the way that their words and actions were received may potentially cause a situation or experience that made others feel comfortable or excluded, and those were the difficult conversations that I found myself as the chaplain having. But the reactions were never angry or resentful from any of the campers. If anything, the only strong emotions that were displayed was a genuine sense of anger at themselves for having created a situation that had hurt or excluded someone else like themselves. I actually had one camper on the last day who thanked me for having the time to bring him back into covenant. Perhaps the most profound experience I had during my time at camp came in the form of something quite unexpected. When I arrived at camp and was given my official name tag to wear as the campers arrived, my name tag read, Rev. Matt. It was the first time that I had been part of a community that saw fit to ordain me, even if it was only for a week. In the midst of adults who are all too quick to question credentials and whether or not one has the necessary experience needed for the role, I found a community of 42 high schoolers who were the first to ordain and call me as their minister. They were able to give me something I have not always found in myself, the ability to be seen as a competent leader. The other thing that they offered me were songs. The community would often come together to sing songs. The theme of the camp was singing the journey, after all. Many of them are the songs that you have sung today, songs that tell of hospitality, connection, and recognition of self-worth and value. There was one song that was new to me and was not in the hymnal that they sung at U Bar U camp, which was a tradition called Good Friends. It is the token that I give to you and that I invite you to take with you. May its words be the message that you need to hear as you leave this place and you resume the blessing of your precious lives. Good friends, let me tell you how I feel. You have given me a treasure. I love you so. Good friends, let me tell you how I feel. You have given me a treasure. I love you so. Blessed be. Amen. Shalom. Namaste. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you all so much.